Hello and welcome back to the Heritage Boatworks Podcast. This is episode number 7. Hi folks, welcome back to the show. This is the one-of-a-kind podcast about boat building and boat builders in New England, and I am your host, Jed Lavoie. Thank you so much for joining me. It has been quite the busy month, and it's getting pretty exciting here for Heritage Boatworks. A lot going on. I had an interview with one of my heroes of the boating industry, another hero of the boat building industry, someone that builds a boat that I've always aspired to have and now own one. More on that later, but I'll fill you in on the month a little more first. If you could, please connect with me on Facebook or Twitter. My username on both of those accounts is HeritageBW. B as in boy, W as in W. Also, you can subscribe to my monthly newsletter if you go to heritageboatworks.com/contact. That will bring you to a very short form. I think there's just 3 fields, and you can sign up there. All I'm going to send you is the monthly newsletter or any timely announcements if I have to send them in advance of the newsletter. I do not spam. I hate spam. So you can't, don't worry about getting spam from me, and you can unsubscribe at any time. I also launched my resource guide. If there's anybody out there that has ever considered building a boat, or maybe some of you veterans out there that are curious on what resources I use when I'm deciding what boat I want to buy and what materials, where to get my materials, such as plywood and glue and epoxy, fiberglass, etc., etc. I have kind of a routine I go through when I pick my boats and when I start gathering all the material I need. And this resource guide just kind of walks through that routine with all the links to the sites I use. If you go to my homepage, on the right there's a tab that says Resource Guide. You can just click on that and give me your email address, and I'll send you a link. And that is free. There's no charge for that. All I ask for is your email address. So in the last podcast, I mentioned that I had started a boat building class with Maggie, my daughter. She's 8 at the end of this month. That's going great. Maggie really loves working. I'm not sure if she likes staying up a little later or if she actually likes building the boat, but I'm not going to ask. We're down there building boats together, and I think we're having a great time. A couple of nights ago, we laminated the stem. Didn't come out so great, but I think I'll be able to clean it up pretty well with some sanding. But what I did was I had to laminate a number of pieces of plywood together to get to my 2.5-inch thickness. So I bored a couple holes in there and used some wooden pegs just to kind of keep them all in line. But unfortunately, the pegs must have been a little off kilter because the whole assembly has it's got kind of a rocker to it, so it's a little off. But like I say, I think with my belt sander, my desktop benchtop belt sander, I should be able to straighten that out a bit. Otherwise, we'll just start over, and that's one thing I've had to explain to Maggie, is that there's really no wood boat out there that's perfect. It's a craft that has its own imperfections. Every boat has an imperfection in it, or two, and some more than others. And sometimes you make a mistake and you just go back and fix your mistakes. Much easier to fix with wood than it is with fiberglass. So that's the beauty of building a wooden boat. So we did that. Also, things are working in my favor as far as the boat building class goes. Maggie and I were downstairs working, and I heard some little footsteps on the stairs coming down, and it was my son Harry. Harry is now 6 years old, and he rounded the corner and looked at Maggie and I with a face like a wife that had just walked in on her husband cheating on her or something. He was so upset, and the first words out of his mouth were, "What's going on down here?" And I told him that Maggie and I were building a boat together, and he was crushed. He was just absolutely crushed, and I felt terrible for him. So I went up and spoke to my wife about it, and what's the obvious solution to this? Well, the obvious solution is I'm just going to have to buy Harry a boat, or some plans for a boat, and I'm going to have to build a boat with Harry as well. And lo and behold, my wife agreed, and I'm now building 2 boats. I got one going with Harry and one going with Maggie. Harry's just 6. It's a little more challenging to keep him interested. Since we're just cutting panels right now, it's kind of the tedious portion of boat building. Measuring, bending a batten to get the curves. It's interesting for the first couple of lines, and then it gets real boring. So I think I think I'm going to try to sneak down there and just cut the pieces out myself, and Harry and I can start putting it together. I think that'll hold his attention a lot better. So that's been going very well. And it's a great excuse for me to get down in the basement a lot more often. So I'm really enjoying that. So that's about it from my end. This coming weekend, I am going to be traveling to Mystic, Connecticut, to the Catboat Association Resource Show. So I've been a Catboat Association member for, I think 7 or 8 years now, and possibly more. Yeah, I'm not going to do that math right now. But they do their annual meeting every year in Mystic at the Marriott down in, I think it's actually in Groton, but it's called the Mystic Marriott. And they have a resource show there, which is basically that they have a bunch of boat builders, a handful of boat builders that go down there, catboat-focused people, artwork, some small things. It's a pretty small show, but I got myself a table and made up some poster boards, and my daughter's actually going to come along. She has a bunch of bracelets, nautical type of bracelets she's going to sell, so we're going to have our own little table there and really try to get the word out about Heritage Boatworks, and hopefully I'll get a bunch of subscribers and also a bunch of people that will pass my name along. I think I'm also getting a write-up in the Catboat Association quarterly bulletin. So yeah, we're getting the name out there a bit. I've got my subscriber rate and my podcast listeners have been going steadily up over the past 5 or 6 months I've been doing this, so it's all very exciting. And I'm looking forward to the show this weekend and spending some time with my daughter, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun and great exposure for her to meet some of these folks that are so passionate about their boats. I mean, the catboats are beautiful, and I'm pretty obsessed with catboats as well. And it's just a good lot of people, so I think it'll be great exposure for her. So, which is a good segue into my next topic, which is the interview. This month's interview was with Geoff Marshall. Now, Geoff is the son of Breck Marshall, and Breck was the original person behind Marshall Marine, and basically the world's first fiberglass catboat. Catboats were always built in wood, and Geoff goes through kind of the history of the catboat, the history of Marshall Marine. Geoff is now the owner of Marshall Marine, so he's in charge of the whole operation, and kind of an interesting story about how he ended up in that position. And a little backstory for me too. The Marshall catboat is it's hard for me to put into words because I am in love with Marshall catboats. I have one. It was before I had one. I got mine in October of 2011. And before that, I had been looking at them for a good probably 10 or 11 years. I had a sturdy cat. Heidi Reed was my interview in podcast number 5, I believe. And she built the sturdy cat boats. And I had one of those for years and loved it. But I always had the Marshall cat in my head, and always wanted to get one. Just had to get the budget together. Actually, if you go onto my blog page, the HBW blog, there is a blog called Marsalian Me, which is how I came to get my Marshall Sanderling. But I always dreamed of getting one, and every time I'd see them on the Cape, they're everywhere. It's a very, very popular cat boat. I always would see one, and basically my world would stop spinning for a minute so I could watch it sail by or cruise by or whatever it was doing. And my whole family would say, oh, hold on, Daddy sees another cat boat. We got to wait until he watches it sail by. So when I spoke to Geoff at a number of shows, and I actually have a tattoo of a Marshall cat boat on my arm. And I was known for a long time as the cat boat guy before I actually started talking to Geoff about buying one. So in October 2011, I was able to get the funds together, and I actually bought a 1973 Marshall Sanderling. Her name is Marcelli. She's named after my daughter and my wife and her mother, if you want to go that far back, and her mother before that. So Margaret is a family tradition name in my wife's family. So Marcelli is a Gaelic translation of Margaret. So it's named after them. It's a wonderful boat, just beautiful, and it's probably going to be the last boat I ever buy. I'm not going to say the last boat I ever build because I'm building boats all the time, but it'll probably be the last boat I ever buy. It's beautiful. It serves my purpose perfectly, and I'm very happy to have it. So Geoff knows me well as the guy that is kind of obsessed with his boats, probably just as much as he is. So interviewing Geoff was something I was looking forward to pretty much the minute I decided to do this podcast. So it was great to drive out to South Dartmouth, out to Marshall Marine. And I took some photographs. You can certainly check out the show page. If you go to heritageboatworks.com/podcasts, there is a show index there, and you click on that index for the Geoff Marshall interview, and you'll see the show notes and some photographs I took there, and kind of a summary of the whole visit. So, without further ado, here is my interview with Geoff Marshall at Marshall Marine in South Dartmouth, Massachusetts. Take it away, Geoff. Hi, and welcome back. I am here in South Dartmouth, Massachusetts at Marshall Marine, and I am joined by Geoff Marshall. Welcome to the podcast, Geoff.
Thank you, Jed.
I guess my love affair with Marshall boats, Marshall cats, started long before I met Geoff here, but I've known Geoff for about 5 years or so now. Seen him at boat shows. Always had an affinity for cat boats, and Marshall is really the quintessential cat boat builder, in my opinion. So I wanted to kind of find out the story. I know a lot of the history of Marshall, but I wanted to hear it from Geoff. Let's start with how Marshall started, and maybe the history with starting with Breck and going through that. So yeah, how did Marshall get started?
Well, my father had, like you, a strong affinity for cat boats growing up. Sailed them in Narragansett Bay and various other locations. And at one point went to work in Rhode Island building fiberglass boats, Galaxies, Block Island 40s, larger boats, but really wanted to pursue cat boats. And the builder that he was working with had no interest in building fiberglass cat boats, so he kind of took the ball and ran and went off by himself. Started up in New Hampshire with some station frames from an old cat boat that he set up, recreated some of the others, and then modified it so that it could be molded and pulled out of a mold. And at the time of 1962, it was not widely accepted to be building boats inland in New Hampshire.
Right. So Breck was focused on fiberglass pretty early on.
Fiberglass.
Okay.
Yeah, he had been building fiberglass boats for 4 or 5 years prior, and that was in its infancy as far as production of fiberglass at that time. So he built probably about a dozen of them up in New Hampshire, but didn't receive much interest. The first boat show he brought the boat to was New York, and had some interest, but didn't get a lot of attention because it was built inland. Within a year, he moved the business down here to Dartmouth, Mass, and interest picked up quite quickly. He also took a couple of the boats to different catboat rendezvous and did quite well. One, it was a lighter, quicker boat, and he was quite a successful racer anyway. But once the results of a lot of these races came in, what people saw was a much less maintenance required to keep a boat going. Interest picked up, and orders really started coming in. Sold all the boats he had built in New Hampshire, and then the backlog started from there. So, but I think he was enamored with the hull shape, and for what many perceive as a lack of speed and performance, he saw that there was actually quite a bit of performance for the size of the boat, and a lot of other great features with the shallow draft and the manageability of just one sail.
Right.
From there it blossomed.
Right.
50+ years later, here we are.
Yeah, yeah. So I know your involvement in getting into Marshall was a bit by default, a bit storied getting here. So let's get a little history on you. Like let's say where after high school, where'd you go from there?
After high school, I think like a lot of kids coming out of high school, didn't have a whole lot of idea what I wanted to do. Went off to college, majored in a variety of things from engineering to biology to English. Then got out of college and still didn't know what I wanted to do. Ended up getting in the boating business shortly after college, building 420s, Optimists, and various other projects. And what did I do after that? Went to school for naval architecture after telling myself I was done with school.
Yeah.
But a little bit like my father, had an affinity for hull shapes and how they go and how they're put together. So that was a little bit enlightening. After that, I was doing some special projects for a builder in Rhode Island. I was a captain on a boat for a couple of years. And
what boat was you captain of?
I was a Bristol 45.
Okay.
And based out of here in Dartmouth, but we went from Caribbean to the Bahamas to Canada and up and down the coast.
Nice.
So it was a fun time. Then I went to work down the road at Concordia Boatyard as a rigger and a customer service manager. And it was after being there 5 or 6 years that John Garfield and I started to talk. I got it in my head that I wanted to own a business in the marine industry. And I think the timing was about right. I think John was looking for his exit strategy, and I was looking for my entrance strategy, so to say. And so I came to work for John, and with the intention of working something out long term. And
Yeah.
5 years later, we worked something out.
So just for a little listener history here, John took over the business from Breck. Breck passed away. John took over the business, and then kind of hand the reins back over to you. You bought the business back.
Yeah, John owned it for about 20 years.
Okay.
He worked with my father from, I want to say, about 1970 on.
Mm-hmm.
So he was sort of his right-hand man and was very familiar with the business and kept it running.
Right. So how about the history of the boats you've offered? I know you started with Breck started with the Sanderling, and how did it move into the boats you offer now? I know you offer 4 now, correct?
Yeah, the Sandling is what started the company, and then I think in the early years people were interested in Sandling, but some people were looking for something bigger, something with a little more cruising capabilities. So he came up with a 22 in 1965, which is in effect a scaled up 18, slightly different lines to accommodate inboard engines and bigger interiors where more sleeping capabilities and galleys and that kind of thing. And then in 1972, where a lot of people were just looking for something a little smaller than the Sanderling, he came up with the Sandpiper, a 15-foot catboat. And again, that's essentially a scaled-down version of the Sanderling. And we still build all three of those models today. And the only other model we're building now is something called a Seconic 23. It's a beautiful 23-foot double-ended day sailor designed by Joel White. It was a boat that Edie and Duff and Mattapoisett was building for about 15 years. And when they were closing down, they offered us the molds for a very reasonable price. And it's a boat I've been looking at for, I want to say, the last 10 years or so. And to get the opportunity to build them was a quick decision. We've built 11 of those to date, and we've got 2 more to build this coming winter so far.
Nice. So. Nice. The last time I saw you, I think you had sold one.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Excellent. Which was probably a couple of years back.
Yeah, no, it's come out. We've done, I would say we've averaged about 4 a year now.
Yeah.
So.
Now, you use the same construction methods and everything else for that boat that you use for the cats?
It's slightly different. The hulls use a thin coring material, whereas the cats are solid glass.
Okay.
The decks are foam core, but the decks on the cat boats are as well. So that's very similar. The same mold shop that is making the cat hulls and decks for us is making the Seconic parts, and they actually used to build the parts for Edie and Duff in the first 7 or 8 years they were building the boat. So it was when the molds went back to them, it was a very familiar process, so there was no real learning curve there.
Nice.
So, but as far as the hardware and the methods of installing hardware and teak and bonding parts together, that's the same as building the cat boats.
Okay. I know there's been some changes. I own a 1973 Marshall Sanderling that I got from Geoff here in the broker program, and there's definitely some weaknesses with the older boats as far as the bulkheads, the floor, things like that. So what has changed in the construction of some of the boats that over the years where you've seen weaknesses?
Yeah, I think the one you just mentioned is the biggest weakness we've found. A lot of the older boats are coming back to us. There were soft bulkheads or soft cockpit soles or floor frames, and that come from a variety of reasons. Nevertheless, it was a problem we wanted to avoid. So, the winter of 2008, we designed a molded cockpit for the boat. And even the bulkheads, we're not using plywood anymore. It's a high-density foam board. Again, the cockpit it's got a molded fiberglass grid which gets bonded to the hull. Molded cockpit sole, which is foam cord, gets set down next, and then a molded seat and coaming, which gets set in place. The look is very similar to the older style bench seats, which is what we were hoping to do. The result is a material that won't rot, and also surfaces that are much easier to clean and maintain. It's not a painted surface anymore, so you don't have to keep up with paint. And that's proven to be quite successful. One of the key criteria when coming up with these molded parts is we wanted to be able to retrofit an older boat with the new cockpit. And we have done that on probably half a dozen occasions. It's a fairly large project, but depending on what your uses or for the boat are or needs, it can certainly prolong the life of the boat quite a bit.
Yeah, keeping in mind that my boat is 40 years old, so thankfully the owner before me put a lot of money into it that I didn't have to put into it. So
keeps it nice and solid.
Yes, it's hard as a rock now. It's fantastic. All right, how about talking a little more about the construction method of the boats? Like, how exactly do they go together?
Well, every boat is hand laid in a mold. We used to subcontract that out and always have to the same company up in Freetown, Grove Plastics. The mold process, they'll spray the gel coat into the mold, whatever color the hull or deck may be. Then they will lay in a layer of matte, and then a heavy-duty layer of 24-ounce roving, more matte, more roving, and then there's depending on the hull, they'll lay up more glass in certain areas to stiffen areas, certainly around centerboard trunks and things like that.
And this is part of probably what gives Marshall kind of the bomb-proof reputation, is the fact that they're solid fiberglass.
That and I think back in 50 plus years ago when we started building them, fiberglass was still relatively unknown, its strength and what it can do. So I think a lot of the boats were built overkill, and we haven't changed the alignment schedule since then. We probably could build a lighter boat. But I like the fact that some of the boats in 1962 are still out there, and the hull shape hasn't changed.
Right.
They're still rock solid. So, but the mold shop will mold the parts and do some of the assembly depending on which boat. The sandpipers come to us with the cockpits and the decks already installed, and we'll finish them off with teak trim and bronze hardware. Whereas the 22s come to us with a hull and a deck, and we're building the interiors and doing a lot more of the assembly in that regard.
Okay.
So,
how many folks do you have out in the shop right now?
we've got 5 guys in the boat building end,
Nice.
5 guys in the storage and service end. So yeah, 10 people keep us going out there.
Yeah, I came out here when I picked up my boat. It was fall, and it was complete chaos here. People running around getting the boats out of the water.
Yeah.
So
It wasn't during a storm, was it?
it wasn't during a storm, no. But it was haul out season, so the boats were coming out fast and furious.
Yeah, we pack them in tight. It's we're a limited amount of room here, but we try to. I don't think I've ever turned a catboat away.
Yeah, right. I'll definitely have some photos on the website. In the show summary, you can see the yard is chock full of boats. So, as before this interview, we were talking about the Catboat Association, and they have an upcoming annual meeting in Mystic they have every year that Geoff and I both usually attend. Can you speak a little bit about the Catboat Association and how you fit into that? And what I'm saying is, every time I mention your name around the catboat circles, Marshall has this reputation of producing great boats, first of all, but also supporting the catboat has a kind of an enthusiastic following, and Marshall Marine has always kind of been there at the backbone of the Catboat Association, supporting the cause, and it probably has something to do with how popular the boats are, but it seems like you're always there to kind of help people out with their boats.
Well, I guess I always figure the Catboat Association and Marshall Marine have a very symbiotic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the more fun organizations we belong to. It's I want to say I think it's a couple thousand members worldwide. Very enthusiastic group of catboaters, and it's just a fun group to get together with. It's been in existence. Well, they started in 1962, right the same year Marshall Marine did. So and that was, I think, more by coincidence. But over the years, they've been a great resource for catboaters. In terms of information, especially with the website now and the bulletin, there's a lot of great information about catboats because in their quirks. It's been a great source for keeping people informed of different events that are going on with catboats. And catboaters by nature are a very congenial bunch anyway. So I think they like to flock together in some ways.
Seems that way.
And I think since we've been building the catboats so long, and with the numbers of catboats that built over the years, I think the majority of Catboat Association members probably have our boats. So it's especially at something like the annual meeting where it's a great place to get together and answer a bunch of questions that people may have about them. We usually bring a boat down, as do many of the other catboat builders, so it becomes a little bit like a boat show. And all catboat resource show is what they call it. There's a lot of other tables and vendors, people just with a great source of information and ideas. It's one thing I find with I guess I see it through the Catboat Association, is a lot of people are very creative about their catboats and make a lot of subtle changes to things, some not so subtle. That they'll make an 18-foot boat or a 22-foot boat look like a home. And set it up the way they want to. And personalize it themselves. And I think nowhere do I see that more apparently than in Catboat Association functions.
Yeah. That's great. So that meeting is coming up. So let's talk. Let's see what else I had. I think that might be all I had. Why don't we talk a little more about your boats, what you offer, little self promo, so to speak, your elevator conversation.
Sure.
What do you do for a living?